Welcome to this special Q&A session with topic Mission and Serving the Poor. The objective of this session is to better understand mission from an Orthodox perspective, and also to allow us as individuals to get some advice about how we can serve the poor because we have limited resources and there are so many people in need. So to help us do this, we have two speakers today. The first comes to us all the way from Sierra Leone in West Africa. He has been in Sierra Leone since 2008, running a mission, and his name is His Grace Bishop Themi Athamopoulos. Your Grace, welcome back to Australia.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much.
Our second speaker is in fact the parish priest of St. George Greek Orthodox Church in Rose Bay here in Sydney. And we've been very fortunate to be able to bring this Q&A session to you from the beautiful Solaire of St. George. Reverend Gerasimos, thank you very much for allowing us to do this, and welcome.
Thank you, John. Thanks for helping us out today.
Let's start with the most obvious question, mission. What does mission mean for us Orthodox? What is Orthodox mission? And is it in fact different from other mission? And if it is different, how is it different? Your Grace.
Well, mission, hierapostoli, the Greek word for it, and in fact, from the Hebrew background, selea, which means to send out, sending people out to do a particular function. In our case, sending people out to proclaim the gospel and to baptize and so forth, and to spread the faith. So our definition of mission must be grounded upon the founder of Christianity, who established for us the parameters of what mission is. And for us, therefore, it's what Jesus said. And what Jesus said was that we are to go to the whole world, to every nation, irrespective, and to preach the gospel, that is the gospel of salvation, that we are saved through him and through his blood. We are given an opportunity to wash our sins and to be able to enter the kingdom of God. That's the good news. That's the evangelion, the gospel, in short. And that we are to do that without restriction. And you mentioned the Orthodox Church. Well, from the very beginning, the church was outward going. It started in Galilee, from a humble beginning in Nazareth, in Galilee itself, to become a worldwide religion. How did that happen? It happened through people like the Apostle Paul, through the different agents who went out to preach the gospel. So Christianity from the very beginning is outward going. It's trying to bring the world to Christ. During the Byzantine period, we have Cyril and Methodios, we have the Slavic outward going. If today Russia is Orthodox, if today Ukraine is Orthodox, if today Bulgaria is Orthodox, Romania. And so it's because of the outward going of the Constantinopolitan Church to reach out to our Slavic brothers and sisters. So that's one example of the results of mission in the Middle Ages. But then we went through the Turkish period, the Ottoman period, where the West was through the age of colonization and the age of exploration. They set up their churches in Africa, in Latin America, the Jesuits, the Franciscans, the Anglicans, they all set up churches. Well, we were under the yoke of the Ottoman Empire. So we were not able to really do any mission work for 500 years. When finally we were liberated in the 19th century, we started, but it's only in the 20th century that the Greek Orthodox Church has managed to full swing into hierapostoli, into mission work, essentially through the Patriarchate of Alexandria and in Africa. And that's where we are right now. It's like a renaissance mission work, and the Russians too, as well. Yeah.
But there are flavors or components of mission, right? There's education, there's helping the poor. How do we see these various components of mission? Because it's fair to say that when you mention a mission, especially to the secular, the first thing that comes into their mind is you're trying to convert me, you're trying to push me, you're trying to wave a magic wand and make me believe what you believe. But that's not what Orthodox mission is about, is it?
Well, look, we cannot deny that when Jesus says, go to the whole world, teach them about him and about the gospel, and then baptize them. So there's no doubt. We cannot try to masquerade it, and we cannot try to make it comfortable. There is no doubt that one of the major aims of mission work is to convert people. That we cannot hide that. That's true. Now, whether that's uncomfortable in today's world or not, that's unfortunate. But to be honest with you, that is a main aim. Now, how do we do it is another question. Right. We're not gonna be like the conquistadores going into Latin America and forcing people to become Catholic, or forcing people by the gun to become a Protestant or whatever. No, our approach as Orthodox is to go into this mission field, but by providing charity, by providing education, by providing medical services, by providing assistance, providing love, in other words, and providing the gospel of love of God to man and woman. Then we are doing the full gamut of mission work by bringing people into a realization that the church is there to help. The church is there to love them and to take care of them. In that way, mission is a total package then. Yeah.
Father, is there still a role to play for Orthodox mission in Australia? Is it irresponsible to say, well, the Orthodox have been in Australia now for many, many years, our job is done? Is it done?
The short answer is no, the job is not done. And is there a place for mission in Australia? Absolutely. We mentioned the Turkish occupation of Greece for 400 years. And while Orthodox mission couldn't happen outwardly in that period, there were some highlight moments of certain saints, like Saint Koutsouras, for example, and a large number of educated, scholarly, intellectual priests and other, the logi of the period, who believed in inward mission. You have existing Christians who need to be given the gospel. But if we use the words in the original Greek, that would help as well, because we already mentioned that missionary is apostolos, apostle. So we speak about the apostles. And if the main epithet of that generation, and every generation of missionaries, is apostle, as it was for Saint Koutsouras, who is considered an equal to the apostles, is apostolos. If the main epithet and descriptor of the leadership of that mission is that word, mission, then what are we doing? We are sharing certain truths, we are sharing a way of life, and we're sharing something beautiful with people. How can you possibly go on a mission if you don't believe in the mission in the first place? So yes, there is outward mission to non-Christians and people who we feel we can help. And then there's inward mission to people we feel we can help, who might be Christian nominally, have signed a certificate as babies, or their godparents or their parents have signed a certificate as children or as babies, but might as well be non-Christian because they don't understand anything, or they haven't come to understand anything, or they lost their understanding through time. And so there is a place for internal mission, And that's the job of each parish
Right.
within its own community.
Yep.
And Bishop Themi could tell us which one's easier and which is harder. Sometimes, you know,
Yeah.
It's both challenging.
they're different.
Yeah.
They're different.
But that's an interesting perspective. I've actually never thought of, a booster shot,
Yeah.
a refresher course.
Yeah.
This is basically, or let's wake them up again. Let's reinvigorate.
The Protestant called it renewal
Renewal.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Renewal or revival.
or revival. There you go.
Yes, this is something that is not immediately obvious, is it? Because you think you've baptized that child, that's it, it's done.
It's all over.
No,
No.
it's not done.
No.
It's like education. It goes on and on and on.
Correct.
And then when you finish school, you continue your education. You never can say that you've learned everything. Now, another thing that I've often thought about in my travels, there are needy people everywhere. It's a common denominator of every country that you go to. Even the world's greatest economy, or number one economy at the moment, United States, there are needy people everywhere, all over the planet. And there are also people who don't know Christ and people who know Christ. So as an individual seeking, to help, I'd like to ask you, Your Grace, you could have gone anywhere in the world. In fact, you probably could have helped the needy here in Australia. So why did you choose Sierra Leone? I know you started with
Kenya.
first.
Yeah.
So why?
Well,
there?
in Kenya, of course, because of its context of poverty as well. But when I saw in Kenya the pictures of the war in Sierra Leone, the civil war, the amputation of limbs and legs, the ultra poverty, super poverty, I considered that I was living in America in Kenya compared to what was. And at that time, Sierra Leone was the poorest nation in the world. Now, my particular brand of theology is to follow the crucified Christ, the barefoot Christ, the pauper Christ, who says, I was hungry and you came to me, and I was, without clothes and he gave me clothes. And so the beautiful words of Christ. And by the way, there's no other religion. Now, I don't want to sound propagandist, but there is no other world religion where the founding figure identifies with poverty and suffering as much as Jesus does. So that's something that we have as unique to our religion, that suffering is very much part of the Christian religion, and to which others want to kind of avoid, but we don't avoid suffering. We look at it straight in the face, and we know how to handle it because of Christ. So the reason I chose Sierra Leone, because at that time it was the poorest nation in the world in 2007. And I thought, what better way to serve the crucified Christ than going to the poorest nation in the world, obviously. So that's one of the reasons, if not the major reason, I chose Sierra Leone. Yeah.
And Father, the needy of Australia, every parish at some point will want to target some help. We'll want to do something beyond just the circle of parishioners. Have you often thought about how you go about doing that? So in the context of St. George, which is the parish does it ever cross your mind, how am I going to, there are needy in Australia, how do I do that? How do I identify them? How do I channel my energies? Both, not just as an individual but individuals as ourselves, or as a church program. How do you go about picking something that will help, that will scale?
Helping people in necessitous circumstances is a basic foundation of any church.
Yeah.
So what often happens is the need comes to us. This is one way it happens.
Yeah.
So where someone is in need or has a difficulty or is in difficult circumstances, they know that they're going to be knocking on the doors of a church.
Yeah.
Numerous examples. In my experience, any other priest would have, equal or more experiences with people in need. Now, sometimes it's people who are destitute, sometimes it's people that are not destitute but are having specific problems for a specific time. In some cases, it's they need to pay their rent and they can't right now, but if they can get their rent paid now, that's the first and last time you will help them. They just need that little bit of help.
Yeah.
So that need comes and finds us.
Right.
So, but you're thinking, how can you go out and find people who need help? We do that too. So various churches have, and this is credit to not just the priests, but credit to volunteers and lay people who involve themselves in charity and philanthropy. Priests on their own can't do anything without the help of a community, a group of people. So just depends on each church, and you have different groups within certain churches who excel in charity and philanthropy, and other churches don't have as much action or energy in that specific mission field, but they might have an activity elsewhere. It's fine. We're not criticizing. It's just the way it is. And sometimes people who do want to do charity and philanthropy will gravitate to an activity or a church that is channeling that group of people. And so they may not necessarily be parishioners of that church, but it becomes a magnet for other parishioners from other churches to involve themselves in that initiative. In Australia, and the bishop would be able to help us here in terms of comparing. I mean, to be poor in Australia is one thing, and to be poor in Africa is an entirely different thing.
Correct.
And what we define as poor is not poor in Africa.
Correct.
Yes.
And I'm not trivializing homeless people in first world countries. Can we even use first world or third world anymore?
It's more north and south now, and developing and developed.
Developing or developed.
Yeah.
So maybe Bishop can compare the level of poverty we might find in Australia versus the level of poverty we might find in Africa.
This is great, because that was my next question.
Mm.
Who is poor?
Well,
What does poor mean?
Well, according to the United Nations statistics, anybody under $2 a day is poor. That's poverty. Under $1 a day, it's abject poverty. It's like pauperism. It's that we can't go lower than that, right?
Mm.
So we face that. Apparently, in the world today, there are something like 2.5 to 3 billion people living under $2 a day. That's nearly half the world's population. It's not quite. It's a little bit less, but that's not far away.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other hand, you have 400 families who control something like 80% of the world's wealth.
Yeah.
So you can fit them in one airplane, those 400 families, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they control 80% of the world's wealth. Come, what's going on here? So you've got 3 billion people living in squalor, and 400 families who control 80% of the world's wealth. So there's something going wrong here, right? Mm. But at any rate, the poverty, as the good father said, it's relative. What do you mean by poverty? Depends on your culture. Mm. According to Australian culture, obviously there are different levels of poverty. But the poverty we are talking about is that defined by the United Nations as abject poverty, and which is less than $2 or less than $1 a day. Yeah.
Let's explore some of the projects that are going on in your mission in Sierra Leone at the moment, Your Grace. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you've been able to achieve, up until now?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit later on about what's coming up.
Yes,
what's
sir.
Next?
Okay, well, I first landed in Sierra Leone in 2007 in December when I got the blessing from His Beatitude Pope Patriarch Theodoros to go to Sierra Leone and to transfer it from Kenya. And look, the minute I landed in Sierra Leone on the airplane from Nairobi, I could smell the poverty. I keep telling people you can smell poverty. I think you may understand that. I'm not sure, but there's a specific smell about abject poverty, and so from then on, I got stuck into the needs of the people. And I worked with the government, and I would ask the government what are the main needs and what do they want. And inevitably, it came down to education. It came down to the future, which is the children. And so we set up kindergartens. We've set up schools. We don't charge money. We don't charge money. We've set up medical clinics. We have 2 of them. Again, we don't charge money, and we give medicine for free, which is a big deal over there, because just to see a doctor is a huge, huge burden upon them. And right now we're into ultrasound, which is, you know, to have ultrasound analysis over there, it's going to cost you 2 million leons or 2.5 million leons, huge amount of money. Whereas we are preparing our people in our compound, in our church, to be trained in I have an ultrasound school where we're preparing people to. I have an ultrasound machine, and I'm hoping to get more ultrasound machines, whereby we can cut the cost down from 3 million leons to practically nothing. And a lot of the poor die very young because they can't afford things like ultrasound.
Right.
You understand?
Yeah.
So by the time they are so sick and they go to a hospital, it's too late. They can't do anything, right? So if I can use, we are training our people now. By the end of the year, hopefully, I will be able to start an ultrasound clinic, and I will be able then to have the poor come and be tested on the machine. You understand? Mm. So that's one breakthrough by the grace of God, we've managed also to achieve. We have a college, a teachers' college, where we are preparing our teachers for our schools, but also for other schools as well. And the orphanage that you, John, are helping with the girl orphanage. We have a boys' orphanage, a girls' orphanage. And so in all those directions, we look for how we can hit the target of greater need, the greatest need that a person can have in that condition. Yeah. And so I think we've covered, with medicine, with doctors, with teachers, with counselors, with nurses. I think we've got the professionals around, and with priests as chaplains. Yeah. And then also, we also have things like a football club, like for the boys, to get them off the street and to use their energy in a positive way rather than negative, by vandalism and so forth. So we also have the Orthodox Christian Football Club. I have a coach. I have buses to take the boys to practice and so forth. So we do what we can.
Yeah,
do what we can.
That's terrific. And you mentioned the various groups of people that you're helping. There's the children on the one hand, orphans. You've got adults, street boys
right.
for the soccer.
Yeah.
Adults being
not only with adults, it's you can't, if they reach a certain age, it's difficult for them to go back to school or college.
Right.
So in that case, what I can do is either if I can, I would employ them, or if I can't employ them because I don't need them, then I would see what their needs are to try. Like, for example, a woman of 40 is already old in Africa, unfortunately, right? So now she's really got kids that she has to take care of, and she has to pay for their tuition. Her husband has gone. So now how do I help her? Well, the way I can help her is I will give her 1 or 2 million leons, which is around about what, so trying to work out here, about $200, $300, something like that, to set up the business. Well, she will get tomatoes, she will get lettuces, she will get cucumbers. She will go out in the street and start selling. Now, she's never going to be rich, but she will be able to get money to feed her kids and to pay for their tuition. Right.
Father, we've heard about some of the initiatives that His Grace is doing, and there would be other initiatives that we would hear about as a parish. How do we decide which initiative we're going to help? Is there a particular, I don't know, thought process that you go through? Do people just bring new ideas? How do we connect in to initiatives like that? I mean, in the case of His Grace, we were fortunate enough to meet him in the past, to hear of him. Some of us visited him. But is there a way of having a more structured approach to who we help, or is it the same case of initiatives coming to us? I'm just more interested in the Australian context. What projects do we back?
John, there's two moments in the Bible which I think will help us in answering your question. How do you decide? There's so much poverty, there's so much need. How can you possibly do enough? And the short answer is you can't. Mm-hmm. But you should try. Mm-hmm. Now, there's one moment where a woman comes up to Jesus and she washes his feet with a nice, expensive perfume. And one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, gets upset. Why this waste? Mm-hmm. This could have been sold and given to the poor. Uh-huh. And what was Jesus' answer?
The poor you will have always.
The poor you will always have with you, but you won't always have me.
Hallelujah.
Now, this is important because we can be so focused on just the poor that we lose Christ.
Amen.
And if we lose Christ, we won't be helping the poor either. So the starting point is, how can you spread the Evangelium, or the good news of the gospel? That's the starting point. Charity is not our primary task in the church, believe it or not. The gospel is. And how can you change hearts and change lives? Because if you change hearts and lives, then that will bring about the charity and the philanthropy.
Yes.
You need to inspire people to do the charity and the philanthropy in the first place. This is not to say that irreligious people don't engage in charity. They do. We know that statistically. But we also know statistically that religious people, especially Christians, are more charitable statistically than atheist people or non-religious people. That is a statistic fact. Having said that, brings me to the next example. There were common meals held in the apostolic era where the community started growing and the needs of the poor were accumulating, and widows were needed to be fed and their children, and eventually there was a bit of a struggle between those who were of Jewish background, Christians, and then the Hellenistic Jews. What was happening was food was being pushed to the Jewish group or widows, and the Hellenistic widows were being marginalized. And so this complaint comes to the apostles. And the apostles' response wasn't, please split the food fairly. The apostles' response was, we can't abandon the preaching of the word to serve tables. Elect from amongst yourselves certain deacons, servants, who will do this to the best of their ability so that we can focus on the logos, the word. That is also instructional. But once again, the priority is not the philanthropy. That's still a second priority. It's still an important priority. But it can't happen unless the first is done.
Yeah.
And that is the inspiration of people to do it in the first place.
Yeah. Can I add something to that? There seems to be in the Bible also the idea that the primary aim is also philanthropy. Let me give you an example. In the letter of James, James says, true religion is to help widows and orphans. So he makes the center point of religion or thriskia helping the poor. So I think in the New Testament we've got like certain parts that emphasize one aspect of mission, which is preaching, and then you've got other parts that emphasize charity. Like, for example, I was poor and you came to me. I was hungry and you came to me. And therefore, your salvation will depend on whether or not you help the poor. So I think we've got to be both, Holy Father, in my humble opinion, are very, very important, of both of them.
Well,
the preaching,
the way I described it
yeah.
was there's a primary priority and a secondary priority. I didn't say
Right.
that philanthropy is at the bottom of the list.
No,
it's second
no,
on the
no,
list.
no.
As you
But
said,
it's very much at the center
yes,
also.
and
Yes.
it's a question of chicken and the egg. Which comes first,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, obviously,
I truly
obviously, the
believe that you
gospel
can't-
comes
that's
first,
correct, right?
with that follow-up of charity.
Yeah.
Right. So
It's husband and wife. You can't,
absolutely.
yeah.
So
yeah.
you mentioned Jesus himself saying that the criterion of your judgment
Will be on charity.
will be on charity.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Will be that you loved.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, he tells us that.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Yep.
he needed to preach that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bravo.
At the same time,
There had to be a delivery of that message.
needed to be recorded
Yes.
and given as
Yes.
a message.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You can't just do philanthropy
Yes. Without with people knowing
without
about
the
it.
message and the meaning and the
And that's part of the
inspiration.
gospel.
So, yeah, I think we've clarified that.
I think you have. And just one last thing, the last wish of Christ,
Yes, sir.
go into the world
Yes, sir.
and preach to all nations.
Yes, sir.
Didn't exactly say go and feed everybody,
No, but go and preach.
but go and
teach.
preach was,
Yes.
so that was the first,
Yes. Yes.
I guess, the
Yes.
first focus.
Yes.
Let's call
Yes.
it that.
Yes.
Okay, that answers a lot of different questions
Yes.
here and there. But these, you came to Sierra Leone shortly after the Civil War.
Yes.
People were dead and injured.
Yes.
No limbs.
Yes.
A very difficult situation.
Yes.
You had it in your mind. I'm going to preach the gospel, but I need to help people first.
Correct.
Right? Because how am I going to get their attention if they're physically injured?
Not only that, but it's
or
part of Christ's
hungry?
obedience to Christ. Help the
Exactly.
poor. Yeah.
And if we fast forward, we're now talking 4 campuses. We're talking clinics.
Yes.
We're talking, primary schools with hundreds of kids
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
enrolled.
Yes, sir.
Boy, oh boy, we're even talking about ultrasound machines.
Yes, sir.
What are the critical success factors of making that happen? I also hear the flip side, where good-meaning people will go into countries similar to this, some even better a condition than Sierra Leone. They'll spend a few years, and then a decade later, you don't hear much about what's going on.
There are some.
What makes it stick?
Okay, there are some tragic stories. I mean, there are. I've heard of Oprah Winfrey, right? She's a very charitable woman in the United States, a very rich woman, who went to South Africa, I think it was. I may be wrong about the country, but let's just say South Africa. And she wanted to help the girls, the African girls who were very poor. She set up this incredible school. And then I can imagine the kind of school she must have set up, the facilities, everything, like equal to anything in America, equal, And then she left. Well, here is the problem, that unless you are on the ground, you who are starting the mission, you who are in charge of the mission, you got to be on the ground. A lot of people tell me, well, you should come to Australia more often. You should be here longer than what you stayed. No, I actually stay too long. I shouldn't even be here. Why? Because I've got to be there to watch what's going on. You understand? But the situation is that I have to come here to beg so that I can continue the solar panels and the ultrasound and the kids and so forth. I have to come here. So, but at the same time, my mind is over there. So I have to call, I have to send emails to make sure everything is in order, blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the day, you have to be on the ground. You cannot be remote control mission.
Right.
You can't, with all the good intentions in the world, if you could be the richest man in the world, and just send $1 billion down for development, you may not get $1 billion of development,
Right.
unless you are there to make sure that it's going to the right places.
Yep.
Yeah.
On the ground.
Yeah.
Are there any parallels to that, Father, here in Australia? So if we want to spread the word, if we want to give Christians who are already Christians a boost, or we want to help those who come to us, are there certain critical success factors there too? Is there, what makes it stick for us?
I'm still
here
more
in Australia?
curious about Africa on this question.
Yeah.
So in terms of structure and how you operate, I started as a priest here 16 years ago in 2007.
Yes,
I
sir.
remember when you came in 2008,
I'd gone to Sierra Leone.
you had just gone to Sierra Leone, and you were telling me that you started from absolute zero.
Zero, ground zero.
You were on the plane with heading to Sierra Leone, and the person next to you in the aeroplane was the first person you managed to connect with.
Yep.
And that person became your first helper or assistant in the mission.
They did help. Yeah, they did help. Yeah.
So, and in the space of 16 years, you now are talking about 4 churches.
Yep.
How many orphanages?
2
How many
kindergartens?
schools?
About 3 kindergartens.
Total of how many students?
Over 1,000. Easy.
Okay, and how many other? What else?
A
Clinics.
college, clinics.
So
Now,
a dozen projects. Whereas in my parish here, which is we have the richest suburbs in Australia, I've not been able to build anything in terms of bricks and mortar. My mission has been internal mission the whole way.
right. The people had been your mission.
Right.
Yeah.
But you see, there's structures. How do you operate? Do you have people around you? Do you have boards? Do you have
Well, one of the
corporate systems?
secrets.
How does it work?
Well, I'll
Is it
tell
a
you why.
dictatorship? I want to know.
Actually, no. Actually, I have heads of department. Like I have an accountant. I have a finance department. They take care of the finance, but I watch. I sign checks. I'm the one who signs the checks, and I want to know what's this check for. Why? Who are you paying now? Oh, we have to pay the electricity bill. How much? Well, it's so and so. I look at it and I think, okay, that's reasonable. That makes sense. So I let it go. Right. So, in other words, I control the money. I control the money.
Well, that's an instant big difference
Right.
It is.
here in
Yes.
Australia versus what is happening.
But I have to control it. If I don't control it, it's not going to work. Too many committees, right? They come in the way. So
They
one
get
of the,
in the way.
yeah.
Right.
So one of the reasons why China is able to begin to overtake the United States is because they don't have a system. They have a centralized system. And so the government can decide right now to build a railway, right now to build, a spaceship or a satellite. Whereas in the United States, because of the more democratic system, they'll have to go through this committee and that committee and this committee. And by the time they decide, it's taken too long.
It's death by committee.
It's the by committee.
You know?
So there's an inkling, or even, dare I use the word, an odour of autocracy. Is there not, Your Grace, in that? Because in your situation, you have to make the call because.
But I
It's not a developed system.
only do so. I don't interfere with the daily running of the school.
Right.
The principle of our schools, the different principles there, I don't interfere with them. I let them, they're completely free, right? Within the parameters of the policies of the church, right? Or the medical staff. I don't interfere with who they see, who they don't see, how they speak, how they don't speak. Everybody's free. What I do is I supervise.
Yeah.
I supervise overall, but I'm not
Right.
a dictator telling them what to do.
But
Right?
do you let them set the agenda? Or is that something that
Well,
you need to set because you have the bigger picture?
They can set the agenda as long as everything we can afford it.
Right.
We have the budget for it.
Right.
It's reasonable and it's helping.
Yep.
They'll come with me and say, what about this? I say, yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Do
You
it.
take advice.
Like, for example, the whole idea of ultrasound, it didn't come from me. It came from somebody else
Right.
who came to me and said, look, why don't we set up an ultrasound? I can bring you an ultrasound machine from America, da, 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 da. We can try. I said, yeah, great idea. Let's do it.
Right.
So I'm open to all ideas.
Yep.
The only thing is I've got to be careful how the money is used.
Right.
That's
Yep.
basically it.
Got
And that things are in order, right? Yeah.
Got it. You mentioned money. That's a good lead into the next question. And I have to be a little bit cheeky here because, as you know, I make comedy documentaries. So
Oh, yeah?
there's got to be an element of lightheartedness in everything that I do.
Well, let me reinforce that.
Yes.
Aristotle, the great philosopher, said in one of his books that the teacher should use comedy as a teaching weapon, a teaching method.
I'm so happy to hear that because my catchphrase is laugh and learn.
Okay.
Is my catchphrase.
I like that.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's be cheeky.
Okay.
So, Your Grace, you are no longer Your Grace. You are Elon Musk.
Uh-oh.
You are now Elon Musk, but you're still Orthodox,
Yeah.
right? And and Christ is still first and foremost.
Okay.
I probably picked the wrong person. But
You mean
Elon Musk,
tons of money.
Tons of money.
Right, okay.
But it's just a more comic way of putting the question.
Okay.
So you've got tons of money.
Right.
Is that going to make any difference with how you approach mission and the poor in Sierra Leone in your current context?
Yes, it will make enormous difference,
Right,
but not
okay.
not in my approach. I mean, the way that I would behave towards the people would still be the same,
Right.
but the difference in what I could do there would be night and day.
Right.
Absolute night
Is there
and day.
something pressing that you would immediately...
Hospital.
Hospital.
A top hospital,
Right.
international. I'd bring in doctors from Sweden,
Right.
from Greece, from England. I would pay them top salary to be there, so we can help these people who, the hospitals there are not exactly. It's not exactly what it should be, Yeah.
So health, because
Medical help
Medical
would be
help.
one of the number one
Right.
issues there.
Right.
Yeah.
now, assuming all goes well and that was taken care of, and you step back and look at the broader planet and the broader needs, because this fella Elon has a lot of money. Where else would you target that money?
Obviously education. You got to think of the future, right?
Yep.
And you got to think about the children are the future. Okay, so you target the children and you make sure that they have a proper education. They have God. That's very important. And they have the top teachers. They have the best teachers, and that all is money. Unfortunately, it's money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Father, you are now Mark Zuckerberg. Because I know how much you like social media. So I had to make you Mark Zuckerberg. Is that going to make a difference in your pastoral life? Is that, what would it mean? What would you do? What would be your priorities, with that kind of financial strength behind you?
I think the bishop answered sufficiently for me too, in terms of if in a hypothetical situation we had a lot of money or a lot of supply of money,
Of course.
What would you do? The question is, the mission of the Orthodox Church, the historical experience of the Orthodox Church is the best model. I may have mentioned corporate systems. That's a problem specifically in first world countries, specifically in rich countries where it's controlled by
Committees.
And that is not the Orthodox way.
Right.
The Orthodox way is to have a pastor who understands the vision and the mission of the church, and to be able to have that freedom of implementation without having to constantly go through the hoops of process
Correct.
and bureaucracy.
Correct.
So whether I had $5 or $5 billion,
Right.
the Orthodox way, historically, is still the best way to do it.
Right.
There's a story I have here in Rose Bay where, and as I said, we're in a very rich part of Australia, where I got a knock on the door one day, and it was a person who needed money. And he was Arabic, but basically it was, Father, I'm dying and I want to go to Jerusalem today. I said, okay, how can I help? I want you to buy my aeroplane ticket.
Okay.
So instead of just being a $2 ask, this was a
$2,000
$2,000 ask.
Yeah.
I said, look, we don't give out money directly here because it can be abused. It has been in the past. The best I can do is I have my lunch here. You can have my lunch, right? And I started loading him with whatever I could find, and I was like sort of doing this. And in the end, I thought, let me change the topic a little bit. And at that period, I had just installed my pigeonhole system in my office, a piece of furniture. And anyone who was coming through the door, I was saying, do you like my pigeonhole system? Do you like my pigeonhole system? Do you like my pigeonhole system? I was proud of the pigeonhole system. And I thought, let me break the ice here because this is a bit awkward, with this beggar. And I said, do you like my pigeonhole system? And he said, Father, it is beautiful, but I cannot carry it. So that's my little story. I like to share a little anecdote. Maybe you have one.
Well, mine is not funny, but it's didactic. When I first arrived in Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone, we were just leasing a house out, and I had what they call houseboy. I don't like the term, but I'm just using it loosely, where he would make sure that the water runs, or with the electricity when it comes, he puts it on, or if there's no electricity, he would put on the generator, that kind of stuff, okay? Then one day, as it turned out, I had brought my car from Kenya, and one day my car disappeared. It just disappeared. And we didn't know what happened. That my deacon, who became a deacon eventually, was the driver, Jared. He didn't know where the car was. He was the only one who knew how to drive that car. Eventually, an hour later, the police come with this houseboy called Hassan, an Islamic boy, and they, pretty rough, they drop him on my feet, more or less. He's crying his eyes out. I said, what happened? Hey, he took your car. He smashed your car. I said, oh, is that what happened? I didn't realize that the house guy had taken the car for a joyride, and he smashed it up. And then now the police caught him, brought him to me. Now it's up to me to decide his whole future. Okay? Now, as the police are there, the crowds come. It's like, due to lack of entertainment or lack of television or lack of whatever, street situations become street dramas, and people take sides. Like, okay, the police are here, you've got a criminal, you've got the police, you've got a priest. Whose side are we on? And so they barrack for one or the other, you understand? So when the police say something, they cheer them on. When I say something they like, they will cheer me on, And so it becomes like a football match. We've got a crowd watching you, okay? So I'm in the middle of this drama, and Hassan is now crying, okay? And the police are telling me, look, we'll book him, we'll put him away. And at that point, again, I said to myself, I've come to Sierra Leone to put people in prison. I've come here to help people. I've come here to save, not to imprison, that would be. I said, no, we forgive him in the name of Jesus. Well, the crowd didn't like that. The crowd wanted him to go to prison, right? It's like Barabbas, Jesus, they wanted Jesus to be crucified, and they wanted him to be crucified. Wow. And I said, I'm sort of like Pontius Pilate now saying, no, we're not going to crucify him. Yeah. He's forgiven. Wow. And even the police were wondering, why are you forgiving him, And I found out that by doing this, I was actually preaching the gospel. I was actually telling them about Jesus in action, actual, not through a sermon, but through action, Anyway, they finally decided that's what I want. That's what I want. And so this young man, Hassan, is now Father Alexander. He converted. He was catechized. He's now an Orthodox priest. Yeah. So that's my comment. You know, the power of forgiveness can transform people.
Redemption.
Yeah.
Redemption.
Yeah.
So this is a good place to thank you both. Your Grace, thank you very much that you spent this time with us. And of course, a safe trip back home. I know it's going to be a long one, and even longer getting from the airport back to the Tower Hill.
Yeah, correct.
I've done that ride myself.
Correct.
But thank you very much for shedding light on what mission is all about and serving the poor, at least from a developing point of view and an Orthodox point of view, of course. And Father Gerasimos, thank you so much for letting us use the Soleas. I didn't realise it would make such a great studio.
We're glad that we're able to host the interview.
It is very, very good. And of course, last but not least, our audience, thank you very, very much for tuning in. I hope that's given you some insight, particularly understanding what the Orthodox, at least outlook is on mission and how we approach service to the poor. Thank you very much indeed.
Amen.